The corruption of the DOJ and the FBI started at the top, with political appointees, not the bottom. These political appointees engaged in criminal and political misconduct because they had top cover. They knew that even if their misconduct was discovered or reported by whistleblowers, they would be protected by a corrupt oversight system that was also composed of political appointees. For years, corrupt special counsels, inspector generals, and agency directors buried government misconduct in misleading investigative reports known as limited hangouts. The limited hangout originated as a technique in the espionage trade and was a frequently used gimmick of clandestine professionals. When their veil of secrecy is shredded and they can no longer rely on a phony cover story to misinform the public, they resort to admitting, sometimes even volunteering, some of the truth, while still managing to withhold the key and damaging facts in the case. The public, however, is usually so intrigued by the new information that it never thinks to pursue the matter further. Limited hangouts are not designed to convey the truth, but obscure it. To protect themselves from obstruction of justice charges or cover-up allegations, the report writers include most of the truth in the report, but they craft the report to obscure and de-emphasize it. In short, they hide the truth in plain sight, which is almost always the best place to hide something. Consider this video where this man fleeing from an armed gang hides in plain sight. Had he tried to hide behind or in something, they almost certainly would have found him and hurt him, or worse. But because he hid in plain sight, they saw him with their eyes, but they never saw him with their mind. The success of his concealment depended on hiding small elements of the truth: his clothing, his jewelry, and his face. Everything else remained completely visible. Concealing the truth in plain sight is an essential element of the limited hangout. Legitimate reports designed to expose the truth are clear, concise, and complete. Limited hangouts are the exact opposite, because they are designed to obscure the truth. Limited hangouts scatter related pieces of information, sometimes over hundreds of pages, omit key pieces of information necessary to draw accurate conclusions, bury damaging facts in footnotes and obscure sections, and confuse readers using various forms of doublespeak. The goal of the limited hangout is to convince the reader to accept the findings and conclusions supplied by the report writer, and not compare their claimed findings and conclusions to the actual evidence. To see how the system works, we can look at the Durham Report, which was a limited hangout drafted to conceal the fact that FBI Director James Comey ran top cover for Hillary Clinton. Beginning in late 2014, before she formally declared her presidential candidacy, the FBI learned from a well-placed CHS that a foreign government was planning to send an individual to contribute to her anticipated presidential campaign as a way to gain influence with Clinton should she win the presidency. The FBI was able to independently corroborate the information the CHS provided. Based on this predicated information, an FBI field office opened a full counterintelligence investigation. In his limited hangout, John Durham stated Field Office 1 sought FISA coverage of non-U.S. Person 1 almost immediately in order to obtain access to his/her email accounts and to conduct a search of him/her as soon as he/she arrived in the United States. Although Field Office 1 attempted to obtain expedited approval for the FISA authorization, the certified copy of the application was sent by OI to the FBI headquarters for final approval, where it remained, according to Field Office 1 SAC-1, in limbo for approximately 4 months. According to another agent, the application lingered because everyone was super more careful and scared with the big name, Clinton, involved. They were pretty tippy-toeing around HRC because there was a chance she would be the next president. Having served as an FBI agent for over 20 years, I found this paragraph shocking. I could not imagine FBI agents sitting on a FISA application involving a presidential candidate being approached by a foreign nation for 4 months. And it turns out they didn't. Field Office 1 sought FISA coverage of non-U.S. Person 1 almost immediately, and the SAC of Field Office 1 attempted to expedite this approval by emailing Director James Comey and notifying him that the certified FISA application was awaiting his final approval. Durham's report is a limited hangout. He scattered related pieces of information, omitted key pieces of information, buried damaging facts in a footnote, and confused readers using doublespeak about super more careful agents who were pretty tiptoeing around, all to conceal the fact that FBI Director James Comey buried a national security FISA application to protect Hillary Clinton. The Durham report states that certain critical activity in the investigation was delayed for months due to concerns that Clinton was involved. But because Durham's report is a limited hangout, he never says what the certain critical activity was, and his use of the word delayed implies that the certain critical activity in the investigation eventually took place. The certain critical activity in the investigation the Durham report fails to name appears to be the FISA coverage of non-U.S. person 1 in order to obtain access to their email accounts and to conduct a search of them as soon as they arrive in the United States. Bribes, espionage, and treason are typically discussed in person at clandestine meetings. The great difficulty for investigators lies in determining the time, date, and place of these meetings so that surveillance can be initiated. It appears the FISA coverage was the certain critical activity in the investigation necessary to obtain the time, date, place, or content of any meetings between non-U.S. person 1 and Hillary Clinton. Time was obviously of the essence in obtaining this information via FISA coverage of non-U.S. person 1. So the SAC of Field Office 1 sought it almost immediately and attempted to obtain expedited approval for the FISA authorization by personally notifying Director Comey and requesting his final approval via email dated April 14, 2015. Knowing time was of the essence in obtaining FISA coverage of non-U.S. person 1, and that doing so was a critical activity in the investigation, it appears Director Comey not only refused to expedite his final approval over concerns that Clinton was involved, he withheld it altogether to ensure that the FBI did not capture Hillary Clinton on tape meeting or corresponding with non-U.S. person 1. To all but guarantee that such evidence could never be obtained, someone made the FISA ultimately conditioned on the requirement that the FBI give defensive briefings to Clinton, thus informing her of the existence of the FBI's investigation. The FBI's desire to not have Hillary Clinton on tape did not extend to Donald Trump. In fact, it was the complete and total opposite. The FBI's approach to these foreign influence allegations involving Clinton stands in stark contrast to the speed with which the FBI undertook to include the Steele report allegations in the FISA request it submitted targeting Carter Page. The Crossfire Hurricane investigators received the initial Steele reports on September 19, 2016, and within 2 days had included portions of those allegations in the draft Page FISA submission. Approximately 1 month later, the FISA court signed the authorization. The FBI's use of defensive briefings for Hillary Clinton in 2015 contrasts with the FBI's failure to provide a defensive briefing to the Trump campaign. Deputy Director Andrew McCabe noted that at the time Crossfire Hurricane was opened, a defensive briefing could eliminate or reduce your ability to get to the bottom of the threat. He explained that the FBI provides defensive briefings when there is no indication that the specific U.S. person could be working with the adversary. Because the possibility existed that someone on the Trump campaign could have taken the Russians up on their offer, I thought it was wise to open an investigation to look into the situation. As even Durham was forced to admit, how Deputy Director McCabe's observations can be reconciled with the defensive briefings previously provided to Clinton is unclear. The FBI's decision to conduct defensive briefings in the investigation of the foreign government's foreign influence efforts is curious, given that defensive briefings could reduce the likelihood of success of any investigation into the foreign influence allegations. Durham goes on to say in his report, the decision to provide defensive briefings to Clinton seems to conflict directly with McCabe's notion that providing a defensive briefing to the Trump campaign could eliminate or reduce your ability to get to the bottom of the threat. In his limited hangout, Durham used doublespeak to cover up potential obstruction of justice or treason. Providing Hillary Clinton a defensive briefing does not conflict directly with McCabe's notion that providing a defensive briefing could eliminate or reduce your ability to get to the bottom of the threat. Providing Clinton a defensive briefing did exactly this, by alerting her to the existence of Field Office 1's investigation. Durham is using doublespeak to conceal the fact that someone he failed to name appears to have deliberately sabotaged Field Office 1's investigation to protect Hillary Clinton. The only person who appears to have been in a position to do this was FBI Director James Comey. Completely unlike the sensitive FISA coverage sought by the FBI of 4 U.S. persons associated with Donald Trump's campaign, the FISA coverage sought by the FBI field office in the Clinton matter would likely not have gathered any sensitive campaign information, as it only involved a third party who was a non-U.S. person involved in a potential foreign influence operation. The FBI and the department proceeded to obtain authority from the FISA court to conduct surveillance of Page slightly more than 1 month after the Crossfire Hurricane investigators first received the Steele reports. The speed with which surveillance of a U.S. person associated with Trump's campaign was authorized, in the face of the unverified Steele reports and in the absence of a defensive briefing being provided to then-candidate Trump, are difficult to explain compared to the FBI's and department's actions nearly 2 years earlier when confronted with corroborated allegations of attempted foreign influence involving Clinton, who at the time was still an undeclared candidate for the presidency. The differences between the FBI's and department's actions involving Trump and Clinton are not difficult to explain. Within DOJ, there existed a two-tier system of justice, in which the guilty were sometimes protected and the innocent sometimes targeted, based on political considerations. Durham knew this was the simple and obvious explanation, but he refused to say so in his report, because it is a limited hangout that protected and enabled this corrupt system.